Okay, the game we're going to take a look at in this brief video is Brawling Battleships Steel, and it's put out by Lost Battalion Games. I think the game came out in about 2003. Now it's an action card game exclusively, and I must confess I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone when it comes to card games. I'm more of a board war game player, and I really enjoy the card-driven board games. But this is exclusively a card game, and I only have a few card games. What always sucks me in is the nice cards, and this game is no different. So we're going to take a look at some of the cards and a little bit of how the game plays. Now the game came out in 2003 and was designed by Bruce Korn with additional development by S. Craig Taylor Jr. You get a nice manual with the game. It's very nicely illustrated in color, and we'll just take a look at the setup here. They're setting it up as if it was a 4-player. So player number 1 would have you always have your cards facing you, of course. Player 2, player 3, player 4. Now for the purposes of the video I won't set it up like that. I'll have the cards so we can see them all. But the manual is quite good. Nice color illustrations as I mentioned, and it's pretty straightforward. About 14 pages of rules. Alright, now one of the nice features about this game are the Dreadnought cards, because the subject is Dreadnought combat of World War I. And I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit closer for these. Now there's a typical card, the Neptune, British. You can see the victory points for the card there. Below here is where you record the flotation hits. Here is where you record a bridge hit. And here's where you record fires on board. And I'll just show you a couple of other cards to show you how nice they are. Here's the battleship Utah, Iron Duke, French battleship Jean Bart, and Dreadnought. So you can see there's a heck of a lot of cards here. They're all very well done. Oh, and I should point out too that the fire values of the cards are up here, and depending on the little icon, that shows you the firepower of the ship. Now a little wee square icon that's tan colored shows that the ship mainly has light guns. And I think, we'll try to look at another couple of cards here. You can see the little wee icon here is kind of pentagon in green. That shows, I think, medium-sized guns. And then you have the large blue little icon showing you that that's the heavy gun power. But that's the battleship cards themselves. Then you get this action deck, which is very thick. There's lots of cards here, as you can see, and a multitude of different types. They mainly break down to 3 types, though, and I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, the 3 main categories of cards are these tan-colored cards, and you play them sort of for the event during your turn. And there's a whole multitude of these, like reinforcements, lace smoke, all kinds of that type. The other type are these yellowy type cards, and they indicate an event that must be played. So if you have a yellow card in your hand, you must play it first. There's an internal explosion, a North Sea mine barrage, etc. And there's a storm card. Now the cards that have this greenish background are, let's call them reaction cards. You play these during your enemy's turn. So if your enemy plays a card on you, you can play one of these green cards against him. So 3 types: reaction cards, compulsory event cards, and standard cards. Now I'll say something about the standard cards, because most of them are dual use. For example, in most card games you hold your cards like this. We'll call this portrait mode. But most of the cards, as you can see, can be turned sideways. Landscape mode, I'll call it. And the card can be used this way. So a standard card can be used in portrait mode to enact the event on the card, or it can be used sideways as an open fire card. And when you play it as an open fire card, the battleships in your line can fire. And you can see a lot of the cards are dual use. You see a lot of these cards with the side panel. So that's just generally how the cards work. Now I'm going to set up a game, just kind of 2 players. This is not going to give you any idea of what the game is really like to play, because the game really shines as a 3-player game. It's not really designed for 2-player. It can be, which is okay by me. I like 2-player games too. But the game really shines as a 3-player. So what I'm going to do is just set up 2 players, show you what the game setup looks like, go through a couple of card plays and firings, fire the dreadnought, see how the combat works, so you'll get an idea of how the game plays. Okay, if this was a typical 2-player game, you'd set up the game something like this. We'll call this player number 1, and he would select 6 dreadnoughts. Player number 2 would also select 6 dreadnoughts. And each player would be given 6 of these action cards. Now, for the purposes of the video, I'm going to turn player 2's cards around so we can see them, so they're not upside down. Okay, now we have player number 2's ships, at least right side up, so we can see them. Now, I should point out that this is a generic card game, so when you draw your 6 dreadnoughts, you're going to have a mixture perhaps of allies and different nationalities, and it isn't necessarily the allied player versus the Central Powers player. I'm a bit of a purist, so if I was going to play the game, if you wanted to make it a bit more historical, you could actually just have one player select allied ships and the other player Central Powers ships. But the game is not designed that way. So let's go through a typical card play and see how the game works. Okay, we're just looking at player number 1's hand, and of course in the real game these would not be revealed to player number 2. And you can see he's got quite a variety. He's got a lot of the standard cards. He's got one green card, which is a reaction card, and he's got one of these 3 special cards called Offensive Sweep. There's only 3 cards like that in the entire game, and he happens to have one of them. Now, the thing about these special cards is they are the only card that can be used in the 2 formats that I was mentioning to you. This card can be used in the portrait sense and the what I'm going to call the widescreen stance. So this is a dual purpose card that can be used at the same time. The other ones are not that. Remember I told you you could use them in portrait mode or this widescreen mode, not both. This one is different. So just to show you what the firing is like, let's do a typical open fire turn for player number 1. Okay, let's say that player number 1 decides as his first play to use this open fire card. So he turns it into this landscape mode, and he declares that he's opening fire on the enemy squadron. So what he looks at are these little icons I was telling you about. There's a little wee square icon with the tan, and he's got 2 of the blue icons. Now this card is kind of good, because it means 2 different types of guns can fire. So he looks at his squadron below, and he sees which battleships have this little wee square icon. And as it turns out, 5 of his 6 ships do. And then he looks at which ships have this blue icon, and it turns out 1 of them does. Okay, so this is a good card for player number 1, because it means that every one of his ships can fire on an enemy ship. And the rules are that ships have to engage ship to ship. You can't have all ships fire just on one. So we'll have the Neptune fire first, because remember the icons match. So the Neptune will fire, and the little square says that he needs 13 or greater to get a hit. And the dice are, we read them, the red digit first and the white digit second. So we'll roll the dice and see what Neptune gets. He's going to fire against the Indefatigable. He rolls a 66, which is 13 or greater. So we inflict a flotation hit on the Indefatigable. And I'll move these cards in a little bit closer here and change the focus. Okay, so the Neptune got 1 hit on the Indefatigable, so we mark it with this little wee blue block and put it on the first space of the flotation icon. Okay, we'll have the Utah fire on the Royal Oak. It needs 13 or greater. Rolls a 34, so it also gets a hit on the Royal Oak. And I should be taking into account, I forgot about this, the open fire card. Because I rolled 53 or greater on that, I got a bridge hit on the Indefatigable, so we mark the bridge hit. And we got a 34 on the Royal Oak, which is not above the 53, which you need for a special hit. Okay, the Iron Duke now fires, and she'll fire on the Gosser Kerr first. She needs a 13 or greater. Well, she got a 56. Now this one's a little bit different. See, the first icon says 13 or greater, the second one says 26 or greater, and the third one says 46 or greater. And the Iron Duke rolled 56, so she actually inflicts 3 hits on the Gosser Kerr first. So that brings this up to here. Now, she also rolled greater than the 53 for the bridge hit. She got 56, so she inflicts a bridge hit on the Gosser Kerr first. So we've got a good opening fire here by player number 1. Okay, the Jean Bart will now fire on the Der Flinger. She rolls, has to get a 13 or greater. 43, she does. That's still not greater than the 53. So she inflicts a flotation on the Der Flinger. And the Dreadnought will fire, also needing 13 or greater. Gets a 34, which also inflicts a hit on the Kawachi. And the Hercules fires, and she needs a 13 or greater, which she gets, and that inflicts a hit on the Delaware. And that would be player number 1's turn. Although I actually forgot something. I forgot before you actually start your turn, you're supposed to draw 1 card into your hand. So I should have done that first. And this card goes into the discard pile. So that's a typical turn for player number 1. Nothing fancy. And of course I didn't even look at player number 2's hand because I want to show you what the firing looks like. Now, player number 2, as you see, has some green cards. He could have played that card before player number 1 fired. For example, he could have played Dud. Play this card during an enemy turn to cancel any firing card played against your squadron. Now obviously, if you're playing in real life, player number 2 would have played that card, the Dud card, and that would have cancelled all of player number 1's turn. You can imagine the interaction you can get with 4 to 6 players in this game. It's pretty neat, pretty cool, especially with all these different events. And we're not going to go through all the events, there's just too many of them. It's just a cool card game with a good Naval War, World War I theme. I'll mention something about the other little blocks here. You'd use a red block when you cause a fire on an enemy ship. You put a little red block there. And if you happen to hit the bridge, which I blew already, you're supposed to mark with a little wee yellow icon. And as ships get damaged, it also affects the number of cards you have in your hand. So in this little video here, I'm not trying to show you the whole game. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what the game is like. Like I said before, I'm not a great fan of card games, but this one kind of won me over. And the cards are so darn beautiful. That's what drew me right in. Now, having said that I don't like card games, I'd say in the last month I've bought 2 more, which I'd like to review at some future time. I bought Kaiser's Pirates by GMT and Pacific Typhoon, also by GMT. So, don't know what else to tell you more about Brawling Battleships Steel, except it's a nice little game. And you could spend an hour just going through these cards and what they do and all the interaction, and we don't want to do that. So, I want to keep this video short. So, that's it for Brawling Battleships Steel by Lost Battalion Games. You might want to give it a try. It's not a bad game.